9 o'clock in Newport, Rhode Island. It's something other time in Tokyo, Japan. And it's like around 6 o'clock in Palm Springs, California. Wherever you're watching, welcome to the morning meeting. Thank you for joining us. If you're watching on YouTube, fantastic. Good choice. It's a great platform. One of the most popular apps and platforms in the digital world. Great place to curl in and enjoy our hour together. Only thing is, remember our coda, peace, love, and understanding. Don't write smack in the chat. It keeps happening every day. It's almost like it's being done by bots in order to torture me. Please don't do that. And if you're here on the two-way platform, please raise your hand and participate in what is sure to be a conversation both intense and rollicking today with Dan and Sean at the helm. Anything can happen and usually does. And this week, we're only halfway through the week, and we've had some great new people. So if you've never raised your hand before, today is our lucky day. If you raise your hand and participate, we'd love to have you. Thank you very much. You can ask about anything you want, but there are some topics in store for you that we'll be outlining shortly as we talk about the day ahead in America. Dan, let's talk about AOC before we do anything else. She suffered a defeat yesterday. What's in store for the gentlelady from Queens and the Bronx?
Well, she lost the battle, but she's still in the war, so to speak. It sounds like the party is going to elevate her into a couple of different leadership positions. I think Jamie Raskin's going to bring her into the fold on his committee, and I think that Hakeem Jeffries said that he too is going to try to find a way. And so I think it's smart. She's a talent. She's got a lot of political skill, whether you agree with her politics or not. And the party would be smart to leverage it and engage with her.
Sean, would the Republicans like AOC to be visible or not?
I think depends on what issue and who. In a lot of cases, she exemplifies the far crazy left, and so I personally welcome her. I think she should be elevated to every committee and on every issue. So I fully support whatever Jamie Raskin's doing. And but I will say this, and this does happen in a bipartisan way. So I'm not trying to, but just this idea of participation trophies and consolation prizes. There's a race. You lost, and the idea of like I looked at a picture the other day of the Senate leadership. I don't think there's anyone that's not in Senate leadership except Bernie Sanders because he isn't a Democrat. It's a joke. At some point, like why have an XCOM if you're actually not gonna if everybody's in it?
Hey, if we're going to be a big tent party, start with the leadership.
All right, that's a good start to the program today. All right, hold on one second.
Sean, where's your blue blazer and blue shirt, by the way?
Let's just say in this current locale, my wardrobe is more limited.
Okay, this is vacation, Sean.
Yeah. This is vacation, Sean.
All right.
I shouldn't say that. This is getting ready for vacation, Sean, because we're jamming everything into the next 48, 72 hours.
All right. Thank you guys for filling while I did a little actual work to prepare for the next segment. So be ready. We're going to talk about Elon Musk and his text chain. All right. What's on the schedule today? Joe Biden is in Delaware today. Yesterday, we made fun of his going to Delaware. It turns out he's going to Delaware to commemorate the anniversary of the death of his first wife and his daughter in that tragic crash at the beginning of his career in the Senate. I apologize on behalf of all of us for, in our ignorance, making fun of what we thought was another vacation.
Hey, Mark, can I just comment on that? And I share your sentiment. And Dan had a very magnanimous tweet yesterday after we discussed this. I will say this, though. Considering the schedule, it would have been smart for the staff for a variety. I mean, I know we do a lot of political analysis, so let's just make sure everyone understands what I'm saying. I think Biden can, there's a bunch of sympathy that goes out to what he has had to endure as a father, as a husband, as a human being. I can't believe that they wouldn't have noted that, though, right? This is something that's very smart to say he's going to be doing this but the idea that the three of us who I think are very well read, very informed, didn't know that speaks volume to his staff letting him down in these final days, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a fair perspective. But it is a matter of public record, and they do have a right to some privacy, even in the White House. So, all right, there's that. Vice President. I don't count this as breaking news. The Vice President will be in Washington, D.C., where she will receive briefings and conduct internal meetings with staff. These meetings will be closed press. Don't know what Donald Trump or J.D. Vance are doing today. On the Hill, the courtesy calls continue, even as the Republican leadership, we'll talk about this in a moment, tries to figure out how to pass a spending bill to keep the government from shutting down on Monday or over the weekend. It doesn't usually shut down over the weekend. They give themselves a little grace period. But we'll talk about that in a second. Amongst the nominees doing courtesy calls are Scott Bessent, who's up for Treasury Secretary. He's meeting or scheduled to meet with Republicans, McConnell, Murkowski, Cruz, and Langford, but also with Democrats, Bennett, Hassan, and Elizabeth Warren. One of my least favorite cliches in all of journalism is when people just say they'd like to be a fly on the wall at the Elizabeth Warren Scott Bessent meeting. I don't want to be a fly on the wall. I just want to sit in on the meeting and listen. Unfortunately, I won't be able to, but we'll be curious to see what comes out of that. 2:30, Jerome Powell, head of the Fed, holds a news conference to discuss interest rates and monetary policy actions. The Fed is expected to take some action today. Next year, though, is a little up in the air. So let's start there. Sean, it was thought for a while that Donald Trump would do with the Fed chair what he did with the FBI director, which is basically say, quit or be fired. Powell made clear he was not going to quit. Donald Trump seems to, based on comments he's made in the Meet the Press interview, he's backed off. What is going on with Donald Trump's attitude towards the Fed and towards Chairman Powell?
I think it's a good question. I mean, I think there's a little difference with the Fed, with the history, the tradition of the Fed chairman, in terms of serving out their term. I also think that my guess is that his team had a conversation.
Well, but I think, hold on, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think it cuts the other way. I think the notion of the 10-year FBI term is more sacrosanct in the halls of Washington.
Yeah, but he already fired Comey.
Well, I know, but you're saying he only gets one bite at that apple?
No, I'm just saying, look, here's the bigger issue. I think that from a policy perspective, the folks around him have explained to him, look, they're cutting rates, things are moving in the right direction. I'm not sure that they thought that it would actually end up in a better place. That's what at least I'm surmising so far.
But you agree with me, I assume, that if Trump decides he doesn't like him next year, he could obviously change his mind and force
I don't even, I mean, not to beat it, but I think it could be tomorrow too. But I was shocked at the comments that he made on that Meet the Press interview and how much confidence he instilled. And, I mean, Powell is there. He's not worried about putting up additional pictures on the wall.
Yeah. Dan, what are your thoughts on the Powell-Trump relationship?
Oh, I think it's going to be fraught because Powell has a scoreboard, so to speak, and that's the stock market. And I think Trump is very sensitive to the stock market. And look, the FBI doesn't have a scorecard. You can fire the head of the FBI. It may impact things, over time, investigations and the efficiency or the effectiveness of the department. But you start messing with the public markets, you can jawbone all you want, but global and macro, winds will still kind of ride over your words. And so I think he's a little more careful and a little more cautious messing around with the Federal Reserve. I agree with you. I think he'd fire him if he thinks he has to, but there's risk.
I totally agree.
Also, he doesn't feel the same vengeance. I mean, the FBI, like he said in that interview, they raided his house. It's not like Jerome Powell has done anything personally to him.
Yeah. I think they feel like they can have a Trump bump in confidence in markets and why mess with it. Powell is not, I think, as well thought of as he was once upon a time, but he's still a pretty solid figure. And it's just not worth having. If they decide, I think they decided they're not going to have the fight now. So why not just encourage him and try to be on good terms with him? And then, as Sean said, tomorrow Trump could change his mind. But for now, this is the status quo. Be curious to see what kind of questions about Trump the chairman gets today. All right.
Well, by the way, Mark, if the market goes down, in the first 2 years of his term, there's your foil.
Yeah, 100%. All right. Speaker Johnson is back dealing with a dynamic that is all too familiar to anyone who's followed his time in the big job, which is how does he get enough votes, 218 votes in it with a very narrow majority, more than I think he would like. I know more than he would like and more than some people thought. He has had to turn to Democrats to get the votes. I don't see anybody challenging him for speaker. So I think he will be speaker, but he will have a number of instances, including, I'm amazed people aren't talking about this more, raising the debt ceiling, where he's going to have to figure out where he gets the votes to get done what he needs to get done. And you see, just in the attempts to pass this spending bill, you see the normal dynamic, which is the moderates complain, the Freedom Caucus complains. You've got the three people he put on the Rules Committee complaining. So I assume he's going to be able to pass this either with all Republican votes or with putting on the floor, if he can't get a rule, putting on the floor and getting 2/3. But he is facing a new kind of criticism, which is not just from within the conference, but with major players outside, particularly one, Musk, who responded to a tweet from Vivek Ramaswamy about the text of the bill. Put up that tweet, please, that parrot tweet. So Ramaswamy tweets that he's reading the bill and he's basically saying he expects every member to do it too. And Musk just says the bill should not pass. So here you have an ally, a close ally of President Trump, pretty influential with lots of Twitter followers, saying the bill that Speaker Johnson, another ally of President Trump, wants to pass, even though he sees flaws in it. So Speaker Johnson was out doing a couple cable news interviews today. First, here he is on Newsmax.
I know that you've been getting a lot of pushback from your colleagues on this, but why do you feel this is the best package right now?
Well, this is about the only thing we can do. And let me explain what's happening here. I don't disagree with anything that my friends there just said, because I'm a fiscal conservative as well. Remember, at this moment, we only have control of 1/2 of 1/3 of the federal government. We have a razor-thin Republican majority in only one chamber. All this changes in January, of course, thankfully because of the election. But right now, we got to do this short-term funding measure to get us to March 14th. This was the conservative play call. We don't normally like what's called a continuing resolution, a CR, but in this case it makes sense, because if we push it into the first quarter of next year, then we have a Republican-controlled Congress and President Donald J. Trump back in the White House will be able to have more say over the funding decisions for 2025. Now, that would have been an easier thing to do, but then we had circumstances outside of our control. We had these emergencies that are required. So we had, as you know, a record hurricane season. We had Helene and Milton, and they just did massive destruction across our red states, frankly, in the southeast and the eastern side of the country. And then we've had farmers who are in jeopardy of permanently going under. They've had 3 lost years in a row because of Bidenomics and inflation and other circumstances outside of their control. And so when you cobble those two things together, there's a desperate need for that aid, and that's what adds another $100+ billion to the bill, and that's why everybody's uncomfortable with it. I am too. There $100+ billion to the bill, and that's why everybody's uncomfortable with it. I am too.
All right. A parenthetical, makes me sick to my stomach when politicians of either party refer to parts of the country as red or blue in the context of government programs. It's just crazy that they do that.
Well,
Look,
emergency.
Hold on. I'm not done introducing you. Stand by. In addition to defending the bill as the best that can be done under the circumstances, Speaker Johnson also, in both interviews, referred to Elon Musk and suggested, despite Musk's posting on the X platform, things are all good between him and the billionaire. Put up that tweet, please. All right. So, Speaker Johnson, I was communicating with Elon last night. Elon, Vivek, and I are on a text chain together. And I was explaining to them the background of this. And then Vivek and I talked last night until almost midnight. They understand the situation. They said it's not directed at you, Mr. Speaker, but we don't like the spending. And I said, guess what, fellas? I don't either. So here's the new reality for Speaker Johnson. He's spending a lot of his time not trying to sway his own members, but trying to sway outside billionaires. So we'll talk about Elon specifically in a second. But Sean, how is Speaker Johnson going to navigate in 2025 this Groundhog Day situation of the gentleman from Texas and the gentleman from Virginia and the gentleman from everywhere, in some cases, gentlelady, basically saying we're not going to support the only game in town? How's he going to do that?
Well, so look, I was on a text chain last night with Dan Turrentine, and not to name drop, but Dan said to me, No, look, I think this is a totally, first of all, the point that I think I agree with you on the red and blue stuff, but the reason that he did that is he was on Newsmax trying to
No, I know. I know.
conservative. No, just so people
Yeah.
get this. He was basically trying
Yeah.
to say, hey guys, like this is for your people. Don't get upset.
Exactly. But it still makes
So
me sick. I
these
know that's
outside forces, I mean, there was I think Axios had this chart the other day that showed the reach of an Elon tweet versus even a Trump tweet. And I think Johnson now has to go, oh God, like they are now, like if I don't get them on board, I'm going to have
they're
much
the
bigger
executive
problems.
committee.
Right. So he's got to figure this out. I mean, this is going to be something might help him once Trump gets in office and he can just plead to the president, Mr. President, if we don't pass this, here's why, or here's what we're trying to do to advance your agenda. Can you weigh in? And that will be huge. But until then, he's going to have to figure out how to get by for the next, 34 days.
Dan?
Well, to all my Democrats, reason for optimism here. This is not going to change when they get complete control of government. I mean, for the last 15 years, there's a dozen Republicans in the House who want to be no. They try to find ways to get to no. It's good for their brand. They always complain that the leadership is weak. They're not pure enough. They're willing to kind of just cause trouble and get to go on, different cable channels and maybe now, podcasts to complain. I think the problem for Mike Johnson is, one, nobody fears him. So next year, he is going to have to constantly rely on Donald Trump. He's going to have to constantly go to the White House. We'll talk about Elon Musk here in a minute. But this is why some people are very nervous about two reconciliation bills, because everything, the debt ceiling, everything, Trump is going to have to start burning capital down to keep everybody on board, or they're going to have to cut deals with Democrats, which I don't think Trump wants to do. I don't think the base wants to do. I think right now there's this feeling of like Trump's on a roll. He's super powerful. We got everything. We're going for it. Well, welcome to the reality of governing. It's hard. It is messy. And this is why I said earlier in the week, for Democrats, we will have opportunities to get back in the game, get on offense, and start putting points on the board, because this is not going to change.
All right, this is on the final. So if you're not taking notes now, you should be. Dan Turrentine has a view of burning of political capital that's different than mine. Dan's belief is you use it, you burn it down, it dissipates. My view is if Trump uses his quote unquote political capital to pass the first reconciliation bill with border, defense, and energy in it, his political capital will grow because they'll sell it as a big victory and he'll have more political capital rather than less. Dan, do you want to annotate that? Because it is on the final, so people should understand.
Sure. Look, maybe, but here's the thing. Each of the things you just mentioned will likely, there will be compromises. It won't be pure. You're already hearing some people on the base saying, why is Trump only talking about rounding up the illegals who are criminals? What about all 20 million people that we talked about? Like, why isn't anyone still focused on that? So he will likely have to kind of shave and sand even the three things that he talked about. But let's say a best case scenario, it all goes through. To your point, Mark, he gets credit. Then we have the debt ceiling. Then he's going to have to start begging people and cutting deals with members to keep them on board. I just think there's no way to not govern and burn capital down, because you're just constantly having to make deals and sacrifices. And at some point, people start to say, enough. I'm not willing to play ball with you. And I think if that second reconciliation stretches into next spring, it just gets harder and harder.
Sean, are you more from the Turrentine school or the Halperin school on Trump's capital next year?
I think it depends. I mean, your point, I think, is right. If they come out of reconciliation one with people saying great, good things about it, if the media and the Democrats have done a good job branding it as a bad thing, he'll have lost capital. If they walk out of that like, hey, we cut government, we did the following, blah, 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 then you're right. But I think there's an X factor how it goes down.
Okay. So we talked about Musk, and again, the Musk story, you could say it's overcovered. I actually think it's undercovered. The fact that the guy's on a text chain with the speaker, and they're all on a million text chains, This is a group that texts. I don't know if they're on WhatsApp or what they're on, but this is a big texting group, all these Silicon Valley guys. And they're on not just with the speaker, they're on with different groups of members, different Trump people. This is like a nonstop party of communication that gives them extraordinary influence because when they move the conversation from the private text chain to their followers on X, it becomes a whole different thing. So the Associated Press did a story based on a poll about Elon Musk and how much power he has. And they didn't have a lot of data in here, but they did have their kind of lead. You can go ahead and put up the Associated Press poll, please. They did have in their lead that Musk's fave-unfave is comparable to Trump's. 40% favorable, 50 unfavorable. That's similar to President Trump, depends on the poll. But that's not great. But here's the thing that, guys, that I think this poll undervalues, and it's very similar to Trump, not just in the top line, which is the 40% is a lot more energetic about Musk. They're a subset of the 40%, right? They'll walk over broken glass for the guy. The 50% is like, I don't care for him. They're not vociferous. And I think so the poll understates his capacity to rev up the base and to get stuff done. And if he stops carping, and for instance, he goes all in on confirmation for nominees who are hanging the balance, he's a massively influential person within the party. Sean, what say you about the Musk factor?
I agree. When you do a poll, I mean, it usually breaks into 5 things. Strongly favor, somewhat favor, no opinion, somewhat disagree, strongly disagree. I believe that Elon's support is kind of like Trump's. It's hardcore. The people who don't like him, I bet you if you broke down that 50, you'd see it's pretty soft. But it's not just also whether you like him or not. His impact and his reach is phenomenal. As I said, when that guy sends a tweet on anything, it gets huge amounts of response, of engagement. So he's got a tool that no one else has.
Yeah. Dan.
I'm waiting for this relationship to blow up. It kind of reminds me of Rudy Giuliani when he was mayor of New York in his first term, and he bristled when the police commissioner was on the cover of Time magazine, and everyone was talking about the police commissioner was the reason crime was falling in the city, and not Rudy Giuliani. Trump's history is there's one star and one star only, and I will be very curious as there are more stories about Musk's power. Musk speaking as we, not he. Whether that starts to grate on Trump, that this guy's getting a little too big for his britches. I think the second thing is the reason historically there has not been a CEO of this magnitude sitting next to the president is there are conflicts of interest up the wazoo. And I think I don't agree with Elizabeth Warren on a lot of things, but she has started zeroing in on all of Musk's conflicts. His history is that he doesn't do things because he's he's very charitable. He does them because he has a very vested interest in winning and, winning the business battle and making money. And I think that is a soft spot where Democrats could really start to potentially make some hay. I think it's one of the reasons Jeff Bezos is scurrying down to Mar-a-Lago, because they're at battle in a bunch of things. And then just the last thing I'll say is Musk doesn't strike me as the most politically sophisticated person. And when the Doge Commission starts talking about we're going to make $2 trillion in cuts and no one's going to suffer, good luck with that. And it's not just Democrats that'll object, but I'm waiting for the first time they go to cut a program in a Republican's district. Because again, who's going to have to referee that? Donald Trump. And he hates getting involved in this stuff. So I think ultimately a year from now, they are not buddies anymore.
Man, that was a soliloquy for the ages. That was awesome. Very interesting stuff. I'll be interested to see the adjudication of the conflict of interest stuff, because that is coming to a head. And as I've said before, I'm curious to see how much time he spends in D.C., because part of his influence now, not all, but part is being on the ground with Trump in the room, as Sean knows well. That's the room where it happens. And if he's not going to spend a lot of time at the White House, he can call, he can be on video, whatever, he can be on text chains, but it's just not going to be the same level of minute by minute influence he appears to have now.
Yep.
All right, Bill Clinton, not Bill Clinton, sorry. Joe Biden, amazing to me, has not been a single story in the dominant media about the arc of his, not just his mental acuity decline, but the coverage of it. Because up until the debate where Joe Biden's fate changed, the press acted like there was nothing to see here. There was no serious decline. Maybe he was walking a little bit slower. That was it. Then the debate happens, and the press's attitude is, oh my goodness, he can't be the nominee because he's got all this mental decline. Then he gets off the ticket, and Harris replaces him, and they're back to nothing to see here. It's fine for him to be president, fine for him to serve out the term. Nothing wrong with our coverage that we didn't tell you for the first 3.5 years that he had this huge mental decline. All of this comes to something of a head in a New York Times story published this morning by Peter Baker. I think there was a second byline on it, but I recognize the hand of Peter heavy here on this story. This story basically says, has anecdotes from his recent foreign trips, which they suggest perhaps raise some questions about his stamina. And here's, for me, the money paragraph. This is a twilight of Mr. Biden's presidency, the final days, the final chapter of an epic half-century political journey that has had more than its share of twists and turns. Time is catching up with Mr. Biden. He looks a little older and a little slower with each passing day. That's quite a statement. Each passing day. Maybe there's poetic license on that one. Aides say he remains plenty sharp in the Situation Room, calling world leaders to broker a ceasefire in Lebanon or deal with the chaos of Syria's rebellion. But it is hard to imagine that he seriously thought he could do the world's most stressful job for another 4 years. And the line I'd read after that is, and it's hard to believe that the New York Times did not tell its readers this up until the debate, even though this was a question to at least be debated and which was widely reflected in public opinion polls that showed voters had a lot of doubts about his serving 4 more years. So, Dan, where are we in the media and public debate about Joe Biden's mental acuity decline as it pertains to the next 20 days, as well as the history of his administration?
Oh, I think we're not even on the first page of the first chapter that will ultimately be written. I think there's a lot more to come. I mean, that story yesterday was somewhat sad to read because it's so little, so late. Look, you go back to, I think it was 2 years ago when he stopped going up the front stairs to Air Force One, and they kind of tried to brush it under the, oh, there's nothing here. He's still plenty sharp, right? You talked about when he referred to the dead Congresswoman. Look, I think one of the things that it has to be talked about is kind of how did Donald Trump get off the mat after 2021? You know, how did he rise back up from the ashes of January 6th when he was basically a pariah within the party to where he is now? And part of that reason, I think, is Joe Biden was so absent from the public in terms of using the bully pulpit, being out there. Like, if he's still sharp as a tack, then why isn't he out, you know, in public doing more things, attending more stuff? Right?
Or having a press conference or doing an interview with a serious journalist.
Right. I mean, if nothing else, try to shape your legacy beyond a speech at a think tank, you know, for 15 minutes. Like, so I think there's going to be a lot more. I think there will probably be, you know, the first aide that writes the tell-all book probably is going to get a fortune for doing it. And then, the dam will be broken if Mr. Halperin doesn't beat them all to it. And I think that even thinking about the next 30 days, I've said this a few times recently, you know, at times it makes me sad, but it also kind of angry that, like, our party is stuck in the position it is because we refuse to have this public conversation. We refuse to even, you know, admit what the rest of the public has seen now for the last 3 or 4 years. And so our hands are tied and we're basically waiting for him to leave to kind of do the rebuild. But we have no one to blame but ourselves in this position.
Dan, do you really think that somebody?
I was
going to say, Dan, do you think that somebody will write that book?
Yes, I think there's too much financial incentive, and I think there will be some sense of guilt that some people have, and I just think it'll be too tempting to not say, here are all the times where, you know, we were aghast and it started. I mean, I feel very confident that on that 2020 campaign, I know people saw it, and it's why they kept him so guarded.
Yeah, I saw it in 2017. Before, Sean, you come in and talk about the media and Biden, we're going to go to your questions in a moment. Please raise your electronic hand if you'd like to be part of the conversation. We're asking folks today, Tell us something you'd like different about the morning meeting. More of something, less of something, something we're not doing you'd like us to see. More of Dan, less of Dan, whatever. But please, you can raise your hand and just comment on that, offer that up, or if you've got some other topic you want to discuss, please, as part of your as you come on, tell us something you'd like different about the morning meeting, because we're doing market research today and we don't like to pay for it. We just like you all to tell us. Sean, what do you think of that New York Times story about Joe Biden and Twilight?
Oh, I thought you were asking me what I want to see more of. I just, again, it's rather pathetic that an organization like the New York Times that loves to preach about, you know, not gaslighting people and misinformation continues to soft pedal this. I see these stories about, oh, the media is under attack and you know, the industry is facing these, and it's like, this is the reason why, because you don't do your job. You lie to the American people, you gaslight them, and then you wonder why it's happening. So it's just, to me, it's a pathetic state of the industry as a whole.
Yeah, I can't disagree.
And by the way,
CNN's
it's no wonder when we saw that polling the other day where you wonder why sometimes people have two completely different views of where the world stands. It's because when people getting their information from the New York Times or NBC versus streaming outlets and whatever, they're seeing two different realities. We discuss things, and I think in a very open, honest way that they won't do.
Yeah. I just think quoting aides as they do in that story, not by name, but anonymous aides saying he's right on top of that subject matter. He's in the sit room. He's got it all together. He's got all this stamina. I mean, I just think we're past that point. If you want to give their point of view any credence, you have to put it in a lot sharper relief to say that they're claiming it without evidence and that it runs counter to what we can see with our own eyes. But to just have the story be quote unquote balanced by having their claims that he's right on top of it, it's just not. It's
I mean,
just not right.
that by the way, to your point, like, he's sharp as a tack, and I mean,
Yeah.
that's
It's
insane.
ridiculous. It's insane. And I'll tell you, Dan, I think before there's a book, you're going to see a magazine story written by a reporter with deep sources in Biden world, quoting at least two people, one by name and one on background, saying exactly what you said, saying we saw this forever. There was a team, a special team in place to manage it. Ron Klain was involved. After he left, the team continued without his direct daily involvement. I think you'll see that before book. Books just take a long time. So stand by for that.
Mark,
All
can
right.
I ask one real
Yeah.
insider question?
Yeah.
To Dan's point, based on how the industry has been viewing Biden books, I actually question whether or not there's a publisher that cares, that thinks that
Yeah.
they can make money off that book.
Yeah, there have been a few Biden book contracts out there. I think that the challenge is for the reason you said. Publishers are going to be reluctant to try Biden books because they've all failed. I think, and I'll just be open, maybe this will be me, but I think the book that's going to be done is someone who writes a book that's not just a Biden book, but a Biden and Trump book, or maybe even
Right.
broader than that.
On the election.
And you include the Biden stuff in there, but you've got to have sources on both sides, and that's what makes it a challenge. Because unfortunately for America, there are very few reporters left who have sources on both sides. All right, CNN is reporting moments ago that in a reversal, the House Ethics Committee has now secretly voted to release the Matt Gaetz report, and that will come out after the final votes of the session. So stand by, because that'll make for some good reading.
Well, and by the way,
right.
if they vote at like 1 a.m. on Saturday, if that comes out at 2:30 in the morning, on the tree will fall a little bit with you.
Yeah, that's all right. I'll be
By the way, I hope
blogging about
people
it.
did not blow past the things Mark just said. Those were historic teases that I have a feeling the tape may be replayed in the future.
Stand by. Just stand by. All right. People have sometimes have pretty good Zoom screen names. I would say in the history of the morning meeting, this is the all-time best. Drone expert, Met Secret Service, DOD, DHS. Now, you might be an actor, or you might be the real deal. Sir, what is your name? Where are you? And what's up with that screen name?
Hey, Mark. So my name is Scott Talcott. I live in Boise, Idaho. And you called on me a few weeks ago to talk about Russia.
Yeah,
I was
remember
really
that.
impressed with your balanced view.
Yeah,
So
thank you. Well, thank you for coming back. You're a drone expert. What does that mean, Scott?
So there is a company here in Boise, Idaho. I don't want to publicly name it right now, but I could share the name with you, offline. And I worked on what's called counter drone systems. So these are systems that are meant to find the drones in the sky, detect them, track them, and then, when possible, to try to take them down. And as I said, I have, met with people from Secret Service, DoD, DHS, FBI, and other government agencies about counter drone systems.
So, Scott, have you met with them in the context of the current situation in New Jersey and the Northeast, or just over the months and years?
Over the months and years, but this is a technology that doesn't change much, specifically radars. So I think it's relevant what I'm going to share. And
Please.
It's really important. Huh? Okay.
Go ahead.
So basically, this is the big story about drones, and no one's talking about it. And this is publicly available information right now. The big story is that the government is unable to effectively protect us from drones and especially large crowds in urban environments. And allow me to say this because I can back it up. This means the US government may not be able to effectively protect people who attend the inauguration in January. And I say that very carefully. The facts supporting this view are in plain view. So let's think about the statement that DHS, FBI, FAA, and DoD on Monday. And there are 4 key points that aren't being discussed. First, you may recall they said they're going to send advanced detection technology and trained visual observers. I mean, this is absurd. What are trained visual observers going to do? The drones fly at night, high speeds, and often miles away. I've been to countless counter drone demonstrations in the daytime, and I've never seen a trained visual observer. Okay, what does this mean? About the advanced detection technology? If we need trained visual observers, it means the advanced detection technology either can't effectively detect and track the drones, or we don't have enough of this technology to cover the area concerned. And in my view, it's both. And both points are troubling. A couple more points. Third, I think this is the most important admission from the US government in the statement. They state that such sightings near or over DoD installations are not true. And I know that to be true as well. And then you had a DoD representative come out and say that basically the same thing, that this is nothing new. So how is this possible? Because we're talking about some of the most secret operations of the US government, and we can't stop drones from flying over these sites. So I'm almost done here, just a little bit more if you don't mind.
Yes, sir. Keep going.
So fourth, notice the statement again from the DHS, FBI, FAA, and DoD. It doesn't talk anything about technology to stop or take down drones. If you want to assure the public that everything was under control, you would want to indicate that we have the technology to stop these potential drone threats. So this omission is telling. And then 2 more quick things. So let me add some context about urban environments. So you compare to the flat open area of a military base, it is 10 times more difficult to detect, track, and stop drones in an urban environment. And I won't go into the details unless you want me to. And then finally, we need to mention a couple high-profile drone incidents. Okay, think about large public events in the open. You think about college and NFL games that come to mind. So during the same weekend in September 2022, drones interrupted a University of Washington and Seattle Seahawks football game. I don't know if anybody was aware of that. Some of them went on for 15 or 20 minutes. But in both cases, the unauthorized drone operator was not found. And there have been other cases of drones flying into football stadiums. You may not have heard about the famous Gatwick Airport incident from December 19th to 21st. The airport, I mean, this is real business, was shut down for several days and over 1,000 flights were canceled. And the drone operator was never found. And then in August of 2018, drones carrying explosives detonated near the president of Venezuela. So these incidents show that drone threats are real and difficult, if nearly impossible, to stop. So my questions are simple. It's about the trust in the government, really. And so given recent events, do you believe the US government can effectively detect, track, and stop drones? And once again, I say this very carefully. I think there's too much hysteria about the idea of finding nuclear weapons. I mean, all you have to do is take those nuclear weapons outside of Jersey and you're fine. So I'm very careful in saying this. Do you believe the US government can effectively protect those who will be attending the inauguration in January from drone threats? Those are my 2 questions.
Okay. Scott, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Sean.
Can I ask you 2 questions first?
Yes, sir.
Sure.
Number one, I had heard earlier this morning somebody opined that the U.S. government actually has a, for lack of a better word, a corridor in which they've authorized drones to fly, and this is part of that corridor. It's a testing corridor that they utilize, the military, other government. Are you aware of that?
Not of the specific corridor, but I'm aware that the FAA, you can work with them, and because of the threats of the drones, they will create airspaces where drones are allowed to fly.
Okay.
Especially when they do tests.
So, but you're not aware that there is a government sanction cordoned off corridor where they can fly and test in that area in New Jersey?
Not in that area, but the main thing here is that what I'm sharing about is there's just a lack of information. It's really
Right. No,
hysteria.
I agree with that. I mean, that's, to me, it's either incompetence or lying, but it has to be one or the other. All right, second question. I got one more quick one after this. Why can't the government just shoot one down and be able to analyze friend or foe?
Very interesting. First of all, drone radars are the emerging technology. I mean, instead of finding an eagle, right, with these traditional drone systems, you're looking for a mosquito. So the radars don't really work. The drone radars are still kind of under development. The best radar comes from RADA, which is made in Israel. So first of all, we can't really detect and track them. It's a very difficult thing to do, even kind of in controlled environments. And the range of these radars, to give you an idea, depending on the environments, is only 5 kilometers to 10 kilometers. So, and if you want to shoot one down over an open public, what are you going to use? I mean, our systems tested lasers. We even were working with innovative high-powered microwaves. You don't want that happening in a public environment. Are you going to shoot a missile at it? I mean, what happens there in an open public environment? And of course, there's jamming, but even hobbyists can create drones that kind of basically signal hop. So if you're able to identify one Wi-Fi spectrum, then okay, we think we've got them, we can jam, and then they hop to another one. So these drone technologies are pretty straightforward, and the ability to take them down is very limited, especially in an urban environment.
So in your opinion, are they lying or incompetent?
I think there's both.
And then the last thing I have for you, do you maintain or have you maintained a TS or SCI clearance at any point?
I'm not really familiar with this, Sean. I want to be careful with this, but I'm pretty sure that we had to apply for one. I'm not sure if that finally came through, but I was involved in an application for that, and I don't currently have it. I don't claim to have any connections.
No.
Right
I'm
now,
just
okay.
That's
Dan.
Unbelievably fascinating. I don't know much about this subject other than as a sports fan. I know the NFL has been asking Congress and the FAA to deal with this because of the issue of drones flying over stadiums. They've been the most aggressive of the, compared to Major League Baseball and the NCAA, asking for some help. Look, I'm always on the side of transparency. And there's enough people asking questions who are scared, and those are our citizens. And I think the government owes it. Like back in the day, you could brush this off and it wouldn't be in the New York Times the next day. Now with social media and everything, like you can't just say nothing to see here and act like people are hysterical or that was really just a small jet flying through the air, like I think somebody said. So hopefully there will be a candid conversation, because I imagine it will come out at some point.
Scott, if you were in charge of designing a plan to protect the inauguration, what would it look like?
Really what you have to do, and I'm sure they'll have security everywhere, is you have to stop the operator before they get the drone in the sky. That's really what they're going to do. But keep that in mind, that level of security won't exist, at public events and in other areas.
But
What I want to share with this
Yeah.
is two things real quick. Why am I trying to raise this alarm? It's because first, we're working in the industry, and this has happened in other kind of sectors as well, and nobody's listening to us. And we always said, it's going to take a catastrophic event to get the attention that this deserves. And then the other thing is, and Vivek Ramaswamy talks about it, is, stop treating us like children, just be open with us and, let us know what's going on. And then we can address the situation. But if we stay, in this world of lies and misinformation and incompetence, sooner or later it's going to happen. So yeah, protecting a very large event like the inauguration. Yeah, I know all the radars. This is publicly available information. You can even type into Grok, right? Hey, why are counter drone systems ineffective? All this information's out there available.
The Israelis must have some technology to deal with this, no?
Yeah, that's why the best radars, to my knowledge, are
Yeah.
RADA,
Yeah,
RADA
yeah.
radars,
I mean,
because
you mentioned it,
they work.
but do they have a comprehensive system? Like, if we hired the Israelis to protect the inauguration, would they have anything to offer that we don't have?
No, I mean, think about this. Radars in urban environments, you need a lot of them from all different angles. It's not like a cell tower. You need direct line of sight. And then how can you put all these, 3 kilometer, 5 kilometer radars in all different directions? Where do you mount them? And then you have something, it's basically radar interference. So the more radars you have, think of it, you're in an echo chamber. Well, first, if you're at an open air base, which if you can't protect that, you can't protect in an urban environment, you're standing out, think of it an open plain, and you're shouting, and your voice just goes away and carries. If you're trying to do a bunch of radar placements in an urban environment, right, it's a catch-22 because you need so many for these line of sights. But then all of a sudden, it's like you're in an echo chamber, and then Mark, Dan, Sean, and other people are talking, and it's echoing everywhere. Well, you can't really hear your own signal. I don't profess to be a radar expert, but these basic things are known. Once again, you can just search the internet.
So look, I can barely turn my computer on. So I think I'm probably not the strongest person to talk about drone technology. But what I will say from a political perspective is that after the fiasco that ensued from the Chinese spy balloon going over our nation for 5-6 days, if these leaders, including Admiral John Kirby, have gone out and assured us that there's no threat, despite them not knowing what's going on, and we find out later that this was some kind of internal or external threat to our country, I think it will tarnish the reputation, not just of them, but of all of government. And this will further erode any sense of trust in the institutions. Jack Reed, the senator from Rhode Island, was on local television yesterday. We don't think this is a threat. I mean, they've got everybody singing off the same song sheet now that there's no threat here. So God forbid they're wrong and that this is a bigger issue. I just can't. We are going to see a massive erosion in trust in government that is going to continue to cascade downward.
Scott, except for more coverage of drones on the morning meeting, what changes would you like to see?
Well, first, Mark, if I could ask, I've kind of put my neck out here on the line.
Yeah.
I'd really appreciate if we could talk a little bit after this call, just for 5 minutes. I don't know if that's possible. And I don't know how to give you my contact information. I mean, you can hear it in my voice. I shared this with trepidation.
Yeah.
Because exactly what Sean said, the government doesn't want to know that we're, the emperor without any clothes. I'm a little.
Just go ahead and send your contact information. You had to use the chat function in Zoom.
Yeah, but will other people be able to see it?
No, just send it directly to Audra.
Okay.
The
Thank
Audra's
you.
name.
And to your question, what more would I like to see?
Yeah.
There was one evening program that you had, and it was fantastic because you had these guys from MAGA World, right? And I know that Sean represents it very well, but that's understanding that world is really important, and they had some great insights. So maybe more kind of not hard line, but maybe more people that are involved closely in MAGA World is what I'd share.
All right. Scott, thanks for coming on and sharing. I won't be able to get right back to you because I'm on with Michael Smerconish live at 10 o'clock.
Are you on a text chain with him?
We are on a text chain. It's not as active as that between Speaker Johnson and Elon Musk, but it serves its purpose. Scott, thank you again.
Thank you, Scott.
We appreciate it, and we look forward to having you back as the drone story becomes bigger and bigger. Grateful to you. All right, Mark, come on in. Tell folks where you are who don't know, what's on your mind, and how you'd like to change this program. After you unmute.
First time, long time. I found
Great.
you guys about a week before the election and was really impressed with the coverage and the balanced approach to everything.
Thank you, sir.
I was just, you didn't ask it today, but I was a first-time Trump voter. I sat out 16 and 20, the only two presidential elections I sat out in my lifetime. largely because I didn't trust any candidate of a major ticket that was on the ballot those years. As far as what I'd like to see, and we see a little bit of it, but I think when you do media criticism, it's usually very insightful. And I'd like to see more of specifics, calling out specific bad actors in the mainstream media. We've all seen the Joe Scarborough, this is the best Biden ever, which was an absolute lie. And in any kind of just society, he would be shunned publicly. He wouldn't have a show anymore. And on that note, the entire idea that Al Sharpton, the greatest racial arsonist of our time, is treated as some elder statesman by the Democratic Party and by MSNBC is just an utter disgrace. Every time I see him on TV, I am just reminded of Crown Heights. And you want to talk about someone who legitimately has blood on his hands, it's him. And he's never apologized for it. He's never been held accountable for it. And I just think that what you do so well. And I'm impressed when Dan and Sean say things from the other's perspective, and they understand each other. And Sean will admit when Dan's right, and Dan will admit when Sean's right. But I think it's very important, if we're going to rebuild any kind of trust in media, we need someone specifically calling out the bad actors in the mainstream media. And I know that to some degree that goes against your culture here, but that's the one thing that I would like to see more of.
No, politely calling it out does not go against our culture at all. Let's see if we can get Joe and Al Sharpton to come on and address your concerns themselves. I don't want to speak for them. Did you have another question you wanted to ask, Mark, or is that what you wanted to say?
I guess the one thing the whole horse race for cabinet positions seems to have died down. It seems as though most everything's on the glide path, at least until the hearings at this point. Is that sort of everyone's shared perspective at this point?
Okay, two great topics. Dan, why don't you address one or both, and then Sean?
Yeah, I think for the hearings, I think that's right. Or the nominees, that they, barring a major, excuse me, revelation with the holidays coming up and Congress is going to adjourn this weekend, it likely, this will go into next year and the hearings will start. I don't think they're all through the woods. I do think there will be bumpier times, and one may still end up going by the wayside. As far as the media, it's a good suggestion. I think Al Sharpton, it's got a complicated history. As you say, I grew up outside New York City, so I'm well versed in what happened years ago and his role. I think he has since tried to become an elder statesman in the party. I think he still does have a valuable voice. I think why he's in the media, there's a lot of complications with that from the last decade and how things work. I won't go into all of that, but it's a good suggestion.
Sean.
Unfortunately, the show's only an hour, so if we tried to call out the media, we'd I'm kidding, but I agree with you. I think people need to understand how they operate, how the process works, and what they report. So, in any case, I totally agree with you. I mean, the stuff that really happens sometimes is amazing, and obviously we saw this, with Pete Hegseth. We talked about this in the ProPublica attempt to smear him with his acceptance letter to West Point. God, thank God he held it for whatever 20 years. But had that not happened, they would have attacked him once the bell was rung. I mean, I could go on, but I think you're absolutely right. The second thing is that we didn't really get to it today, but it's fascinating. Trump put out a truth last night about the nominations. The new Congress, remember, gets sworn in January 5th. The Republicans will take the majority and then have a 15-day period in which they're in charge of the floor and can get these guys done. And Trump was warning the current Republicans not to make some kind of deal with Democrats, because when you get sworn in on Inauguration Day, you want at least the national security leads of your cabinet, DOD, state, Director of National Intelligence, Homeland Security, to be in place. Continuity of government. You don't want an acting person in there. And so I think that because Republicans will assume the majority, that's going to help a lot. But there's a lot that's going to go on in the nominations. And I think if there's a few other people up on the Hill today and tomorrow, if they can get through this week without any bombs dropping, I think we walk into January 5th. We go into this holiday period, and then we come out the other side. And the hearings are going to be it. Mark has alluded to some additional information potentially coming out. We'll see. But the hearings are going to be the game.
Mark, thank you. Brandon, let's try to sneak you in real quick. Go, Brandon, as they say in politics.
Hey, thank you. Really appreciate it. Just one quick compliment. I appreciate the levity that you guys bring to the discussion as well. I think that's a huge part of keeping the discussion serious, but not antagonizing somebody. So I really appreciate.
Brandon, I have to say, I've not detected any levity on this program, but if you see some, that's fantastic.
Oh, okay. Well, I see some humor in it.
Okay.
So I'll skip the suggestion. I have a question about the alternative media. I found you guys because of Elon's algorithm, so he helped me out with that. That being said, I get things that come across my feed that I don't seek out, but I wonder how legacy media talks about it behind closed doors. For example, I just saw Project Veritas release a video. Now, I'm not a fan of James O'Keefe, but his videos do have consequences. People get fired. They release statements. There's a guy from the Washington Commanders that got fired. And you brought up how you thought Biden's health is the biggest scandal potentially in the media history. And I would agree with that. And he just released one about a aide revealing some pretty troubling stories. Biden calling, right? Yes, calling for Jake Sullivan while he was on the same trip with him several times when he was literally on a plane or on the same trip. So I'm just curious, the media really discredits their videos, and understandably so for some of them. But again, they have consequences. So I'm just curious, why, these are real stories with consequences in the real world, but it doesn't seem to ever be translated. So I'm just curious of how that's actually viewed in the back rooms.
Yep. Great question, Brandon. Sean.
Well, I think it's a great point. It's funny. Mark sent around this, or the team sent around this great story in Politico yesterday based on our chat of Rahm Emanuel. We know that a lot of people watch the morning meeting, for example, as a source of information, members of Congress, members of the media. But in some ways, for obvious industry reasons, they don't want to fully acknowledge it, right? You see this with a lot of shows, but look at the poll that we talked about the other day, where people are getting their information from streaming services. Look at who the big surrogates were, Joe Rogan, Elon. They're providing information. This is the future. And I get it. If you're at a legacy outlet, that's you're grasping, holding on, because it's just going down and down. Viewership, ad revenue. And I think that there's a hesitancy to fully accept it, embrace it, acknowledge it, and tout it, because that you're pushing people away from the last stat I'll give you is the average viewer, I think, of like CNN is 67, 68 years old. Mm-hmm. And that's on the young end. People who are watching cable for their news are skew much, much older. So the next generation, where this is going, I think by the time that you see the next cycle going, that will be probably the last cycle where you see heavy advertising on legacy outlets. And then it's going to be, you won't be calling it new and old. You just be calling it the media.
Dan, quickly, if you can.
Yeah, I just think there's such a proliferation of options. Everyone is a journalist now. People can publish very easily. And so I think the legacy media is slow to aggregate and bring it in, because to Sean's point, they would be, kind of outsourcing journalism a little bit. But I think Sean's right. In 4 or even 8 years, you will have a very different media landscape when it comes to politics and information.
Brandon, thanks for the great question. Thanks for joining us. We hope you'll come back soon.
Thank you.
All right, excellent. All right, so tonight on Two-Way Tonight, special guest, as Monty Burns would say, Tim Hogan, doesn't ring a bell. This guy, Tim Hogan, who some of you may have heard of, is going to be on to talk about the future of the Democratic Party, and we'll have some other guests probably, and I'll have all the latest news and information that's transpired during the day. Tomorrow morning, in about 23 hours, Dan, Sean, and I will be back for a very special Thursday edition of this program. And a reminder, Friday morning is the last program we're doing of 2024. We'll be on holiday from Monday morning after this program until January 6th. So start to think about your pet rocks, your biorhythms, your daily routine. What are you going to be doing at 9 a.m. Eastern Time and 6 p.m. Eastern Time for a couple weeks? We don't want anybody to have serious withdrawal issues. So please make a plan.
You can just watch old episodes too.
You can also go on YouTube and watch old episodes. So tonight, Tim Hogan. Tomorrow, the three of us. Today, Elizabeth Warren meeting with Scott Bessent. Have a fantastic day. I'll see you at 6.